This is the Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm excited to announce that I have a new sponsor that is very important to me. They are important because they are Dragon, and they make sunglasses and goggles. Those are really important accessories in my life, and what I quickly learned about my Dragon sunglasses is that they float, and that is a game-changing feature for me. I'll tell you all about the tech and get you a discount when you hear their ad within the podcast. But if you listened to my podcast last week, you heard about my dog Chief, and it was a saga behind Chief. And well, to keep you updated, our dog seems to be working normally, but he does have a Frankenstein of a scar. But whatever, it's near his balls and we don't see it that often, and really he doesn't have balls, so it doesn't matter. So now we're testing our pet insurance, and I'll let you know if pet insurance is worth the hassle and the money as our paperwork plays out in the next month. Other than that, I am just back from the OR trade show, but really, I'm recording this intro before I go to OR, so I'm not sure if the show is going to be good or bad or if I'll get a podcast out of it, but I'm going to try. I'm kind of on the fence about the show. It's almost like I want to cancel because you hear about this new Delta variant, but I know that I'm going to be masked and I'm going to try to be as careful as possible, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to be staying with Roy Tuscany of the High Fives Foundation, and I'm excited to see Roy. I'm excited to talk to some people about the podcast, and hopefully, like I said, I'll get a podcast out of it. But who knows? I've never been to the summer show before, and that is that. Regardless, this week I have another legend on the show. And I know I sound like a broken record every week who always says he's got a legend on the show, but Skogen Sprang checks the legendary status box. He was one of those early innovators in skiing. Skogen made the switch from snowboarding to skiing and immediately took over before he almost had it all taken away from him. I won't spoil the story now. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend who likes to ski or snowboard or skate or bike or just likes good interviews or whatever to check out the show and to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. I also want to support the folks that make this show happen. They are Dragon, Alpine Vans, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Rollerblade. I should also mention that there's a minor issue with the audio in the first 2 to 3 minutes of the actual interview of this podcast. It's not that bad at all, but I feel like I have to let you know, and that stops like 3 minutes into the interview, so don't worry about that. Now, let's get talking to Skogen Sprang. So I read somewhere that Olympic viewership is the lowest that it's been in 33 years. And you work with the US ski team. Does anyone at Team USA talk about ratings or worry about that right now?
Not that I've heard of right now, but I'm sure it's being talked about by somebody, at the higher level, with the International Olympic Committee or the US Olympic Committee. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know exactly how much it would correlate. Obviously, it's not good if viewership's down.
Yeah, I mean, it's the lowest that it's been in forever. And I'm sure it's the last thing on the athletes' minds. Like, they don't care about ratings or viewership, right? They just care about their sport.
True. But I think part of it being, with all the TV time and commercial sponsorships and stuff involved, I think for a lot of people, it is a big opportunity to kind of push their career to the next level and make some extra cash. So, yeah, I wonder why.
Well, skateboarding's in the games this year, and you've been skateboarding forever. And what were your thoughts on skateboarding coming into the Olympics before the games?
As with any sport, it's putting it on the world stage. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I had a little bit of mixed emotions just because skateboarding is such a core sport. You wonder how it's going to adapt. But then I think in the end, more stoked for it just being on the big stage. I guess one of my viewpoints for all action sports and stuff is kind of like the natural progression. I think staying true to the culture is obviously super important as you get bigger. So as long as you can do that, and I think, obviously skaters are really good at doing that and definitely true to themselves and sport. So I was really surprised, I guess, or just it was cool to see how much all the skaters really seemed to embrace it. And really, we're also really stoked about it. And so I think I kind of fed off that. That's like, well, cool. Everyone's really embracing it, as they should. And I think it is super cool just looking at the right perspective, I guess.
Yeah, and I can't say I was the most impressed with the whole street portion of it, although I only saw snippets of it. but I did watch the whole women's bowl portion last night. I think the men's is coming up tonight. And I think this men's bowl contest is going to be the highlight of the whole Olympic Games when the world gets to see what these guys can do on an open course like that.
I would agree. No, I'm looking forward to 5:30 this afternoon, watching a bunch of qualifiers. Get all the runs, not be limited to kind of what they show on the primetime stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I watched all the street competition, men and women's. I thought the course was really cool and just had a ton of options, well built. A lot of the things that we look at is also kind of how they qualify and how they run the whole competition, essentially. And I thought it was really cool that they stuck with, the SLS format, and the Olympic Committee really looked to skateboarding to have them dictate how they wanted the contest to be run, which is a little similar to how we were treated kind of when we were brought in as free skiers and we had a system. And I just think that's really valuable for the sport and kind of how it should be, keeping the integrity of the sport and adapting it into the Olympics versus making it a certain way for the Olympics. So yeah, I thought it was really cool and great show. Yeah.
So it makes it sound like skateboarding and skiing have done it right by sticking by the core values of the sport and what they've done throughout the years and kind of brought that into the Olympic venue. But then you look at snowboarding and they were just like, hey, you're going to take the skiers' route and you're going to do whatever they're doing. We're going to put fists in charge of everything.
How do you mean by that?
When they started back in the day when everything was based off of fist stuff for snowboarders, it wasn't like they looked to the other snowboard tour that was going on that all the snowboards respected. They went to the ski guys because they were just like, we already work with you guys in this respect. You're going to take over snowboarding. And I think that created a ton of bad blood for the first 4 years, at least, of snowboarding being in the Olympics.
Are you talking about with half pipe from way back in 98? Or are you talking about with slopestyle here in 2014?
No, I'm talking half pipe back in 98 when they integrated it. Because this is the first year of skateboarding. And you're saying skateboarding did it right. They kept to the SLS system and they did what skateboarders are used to. But back then with snowboarding, they didn't do that. And there was a big controversy because there were snowboarders that were pissed that the ski group was kind of in charge of the rules for snowboarding, which doesn't seem to be the case for skiing or skateboarding, which is cool. But really, your story is not about ratings. It's not about rules. It all starts out in the Bay Area. You have two brothers and you were in the middle of them. And I'm guessing it was a lot of energy and a lot of fights and a lot of stitches growing up.
Yeah, lots of boys running around in our house. Yeah, I'm a middle child. Yeah, we were outside playing, throwing rocks, doing whatever, running through the woods. Definitely kind of learned from my older brother and then passed it on to my younger brother, I guess. But yeah, family of boys and no shortage of sports and loud activities, I'm sure.
Sports for you, the big one I feel like through your kid days and high school and everything is soccer. That was a pretty big deal early on for you. Did that get pretty serious?
It got fairly serious, I guess, at a young age. I would kind of relate it a little bit to some of the kids, I guess, that you see in any sport that maybe get burnt out at a young age because you take it to a high level and are kind of treated as a little bit of a professional, when you are 13, 14, 15, something like that. But I really enjoyed soccer. I always did it in conjunction with other sports. So always with skateboarding or skiing or whatever I was doing, but it did tend to take a little bit of the priority. But I also think it had a lot of really good values and good athletic pieces that kind of taught me a lot of things about sports in general, just body control and also kind of mental game and how to train and take care of your body too. So I still really love soccer, even, back to the Olympics. I've been watching fair amount of soccer there, and then we got our national team doing some other stuff on the side these days too, so big World Cup year coming up here.
And then your other sport, like you said, it was skateboarding. And back then, was it all street stuff, or had the big skate park boom happened where there were parks popping up all over the place?
No, I grew up in a pretty cool era of really the street skating taking off. I distinctly remember there was about 3 full-size vert ramps in my town when I was probably 9-10 years old, something like that. And I was a little too small to get on them, and I was really looking forward to riding vert because late 80s and stuff, that vert was the big deal. And I distinctly remember them all being torn down in this one summer. And that was that, gone. And that was part of the birth of street skating. It was illegal to skate on the streets. all the skate parks from the old 70s had been torn down. Now all these vert ramps that were around were getting torn down. And essentially, you were kind of an outlaw in the street, skating curbs and yards and whatever you could. And you look back to some of the old Powell and Santa Cruz videos that came out around that time, and really cool era of the birth of street skating. And then just ripping around in San Francisco and just all those spots opening up.
And then how about skiing? How old are you when you get into that?
I was lucky being from Bay Area. My dad kind of fell in love with skiing a little later in life when he was like mid-20s or something like that. So he really wanted to make sure that we were able to ski, or that we got exposed to it. And so I actually started skiing at a really young age, going up 2.5, 3 years old. I don't really remember learning to ski. I just remember skiing.
It was something you guys always did.
Yeah, just doing it, going through little trails in the woods or whatever. And I think, one of the unique factors with being from a city like that is it's such a special thing, and you don't get to go every day. So, we were very lucky that we went a fair amount of weekends. It was probably about every other weekend, sometimes some weekends in a row. So I'd probably get to go around 20, 25 days a season when I was younger. You skied all day, every day. It was such a special thing that it wasn't like, oh, we'll just come back and go tomorrow. It was like, we got Saturday and Sunday, and I'm going to ski until my legs fall off or until I can't stand anymore. And my dad was super diehard too, or even if we were dead and we went in or the weather was horrible, he would ski from bell to bell till last chair. No questions asked. It was happening. So, he kind of instilled a little bit of that diehard, gonna ski no matter what attitude in us. And that was pretty cool.
And your older brother, he switched to snowboarding pretty early, like in the mid 80s when snowboarding was just starting up. You're a skateboarder. How come you didn't make the switch to snowboarding back then as well?
He was 5 years older than me, so he was on the cutting edge of all kinds of stuff going on, which was cool for me. And yeah, he got into snowboarding probably around 88, something like that. And you know what was funny is I would watch him. Sometimes I would carry his board up at the end of the day and try to slide a little bit and try and make a turn or two. But I would just always look at his gear, and it looked a little rough. He was in Sorel boots, and they were duct taping foam on the bindings. And he would be talking about how it was slicing into his foot and felt like it was going to cut off his foot or cut off the circulation. And I guess at that point too, when I was 9, 10 years old, I was really confident and able to do a lot on my skis at that point too. I was jumping off cliffs and jumps and moguls and whatever. So I was essentially already really good in my mind at skiing. So I think part of the reason I stuck with skiing was because I was already good at it. And then part of the reason was also looking at the equipment and stuff. It just didn't seem like it was quite up to what it needed to be at that point.
Totally. It was night and day compared to skiing. Even though ski gear, if you look at it now, it kind of sucked back then. Just the level of finish of the product compared to snowboarding at that time. Skis were a finished product that you bought and you knew was ready to go. Snowboarding, you knew you were going to have to tinker a little bit to get things going. It was kind of like the early days of twin tips before people had them. They were bending shit up and doing things to their skis. Well, people had to do that with snowboards in the beginning to get them to work correctly for them.
Right. That's for sure. And then I think skiing, I've always been drawn to it just for there's that element of kind of raw power with your skis. They're just a little longer, a little stiffer. You got stiffer boots, and you're able to do like kind of superhuman things on them, and I think I felt that bit of power always drew me in. And, I think even down the road, that's kind of what drew me back into it.
And then another sport that you were into, and you were probably early on into it, was inline skating. And do you get into that when it's blowing up in the early 90s?
Yeah, that was a kind of an interesting way that I got into it. Actually, the reason I started doing it at all was to play hockey with a couple buddies.
That's how it started for most of the world, I feel like.
It was like, hockey's pretty cool. I always kind of wanted to play ice hockey, and there wasn't a rink within a couple hours. And they were, rollerblade was this new thing way back then in the late 80s. And it was this new invention, essentially, inline skates. And so, yeah, hockey seemed pretty cool. A couple buddies randomly, we got our hands on a couple pairs, and we were playing hockey a few times in the schoolyard. And oddly enough, it evolved from there, kind of coinciding with my ski background, or that I skied at that point. And I did a lot of multi-sport, so I would trade off a lot. I wouldn't say I ever really quit skateboarding, essentially. I did a lot of things at the same time.
You did mountain biking too, right? Like that was big in your town before it was big anywhere in the country, I feel like.
Yeah, I was always a multi-sport guy. Mountain biking was big in Marin, and it had a big influence from those early days. And I lived right up on Mount Tam, so I could go right out my door and mountain bike as well. So I would always be mixing it up, I feel like. I don't know if that was because I couldn't pay attention to one thing long enough, but it seemed like I would really focus on something for a few months and then kind of switch and really get drawn in by something else and bounce back and forth a lot. And I guess back to your original question asking about rollerblading, when we first started too, it was before they really had any grinding plates and all that type of stuff. It was more of this all-terrain vehicle where we were bombing these hills and almost like ski style, like carving down these highways and 2-lane roads all over the place, bombing hills, bombing down stair sets. We'd go into the city and skate around all night. It was a little more of a mobile sport where we were going from point A to point B and really like covering a lot of ground and jumping over stuff kind of fast and high, and not really so much of the little grinding and skate park kind of style stuff. It was almost like a mode of transportation at the same time.
Totally. And I think that was like that for a lot of people. They were skating around, they'd have hockey sticks half the time, and they'd drop the hockey sticks, and they'd go spot to spot with their friends, and yeah, you're jumping and doing stuff along the way, whether it's stair sets or whatever. But when you look at all of these different sports, all of them have a little bit of lifestyle to them, some more than others, some have more culture. Which ones did you follow and make like your lifestyle? Was it all skateboarding and just following what was going on behind the scenes of skateboarding, or was it everything?
I definitely followed board sports a lot more. Yeah, I feel like I have a place in my heart for skateboarding that'll always be there, and that I cherish kind of the individuality and creativity. And I'd almost venture to say that part of the reason I got maybe drawn into inline skating, I guess, was maybe that individuality was so instilled in me that I thought even if it wasn't as cool of a sport, that I enjoyed it and I thought it was cool, and that's kind of all that I needed. And I was like, whatever, screw it. I have fun. I think it's cool. I'm going to do it, even if other people don't. And I don't know, I think some of that actually came from growing up as a skateboarder at a young age and just kind of having that culture drive like my thought process.
And then on the snow side, when do you make the transition from ski to snowboarding?
So I skied my whole life up until I was about a sophomore in high school. So I was about 16. And back to the equipment side of things at snowboarding there, that was about when Burton came out with their like Burton Twin, and basically the twin tip shapes were starting to come out. Bindings were getting a lot nicer. Boots were nicer. And it was definitely blowing up. People were starting to do some off-axis tricks, and it was really starting to come into its own. And that's when, I had to do it. I'd kind of been building up for a couple years of watching it. I was still skiing, but really paying attention to snowboarding more so than, I guess, on the ski side of things. And right around the same time, I got a job at a ski shop. It's kind of one of those kid dreams. You got to get a job. What do you want to do? Why not work at a ski shop? So especially being down in a city, that was kind of a unique thing. Anyway, I got a job at a ski shop, and I kind of had a little more access to getting some discounts on gear. And I met up with one of my really good buddies that I still hang out with to this day. And we started kind of like collecting some gear and buying stuff. And basically, I got an up-to-date snowboard and dropped in. And that was all of a sudden my new goal, was to learn to snowboard, and put in a few painful first days of thinking it was going to be easier and slamming on my knees super hard. But then, it clicks within a couple of days or a few days, and started figuring it out from there, and it was such a great sport, so much fun. Any sport, when you're progressing, is fun, right? When you're learning new things, doing new tricks is like sometimes the best part of it. So that was just such a cool time of like learning and having a great time.
Do you have to make a decision with soccer too? Do you have to be like, I'm going to quit soccer because I'm so into the snow? Or is it just kind of you're done with soccer?
That happened between like sophomore and junior and senior year was when that was happening. I kept playing soccer all the way through high school. until I was 17, 18. That was really when the turn came, was when high school was ending and I was deciding what the next move was and whether that was going to be pursuing soccer, trying to keep that going at a higher level, or I'd always been kind of 50-50 with individual sports and with soccer as a team sport. And I guess no secrets here. Like, I wasn't the best guy on our soccer team. I was on a really high level soccer team, but there was definitely other guys that were better. I was in the middle range. And so I had a really great time doing it and I loved it. But at the same time, there was something that drew me towards the individual sports, and then being able to kind of be more creative and be outdoors, and a little bit more of the adrenaline side of things, I think, drew me in. And yes, so ultimately started forming this master plan of basically moving to Tahoe. You know, I was watching these snowboard movies. There was a huge snowboard community and people up in Tahoe that were blowing up, you know, all these pros, a lot of skateboarders that had also gone to snowboarding, and just seeing this whole dream that they were living up there was just something that really spoke to me and was something I looked at and was like, man, that is it. That is what I want to do. That's so cool and so fun.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to kick things off with Dragon. When it comes to shades, I'll only buy something that makes me look better than I normally do from a cool brand that I really like. They also need to block my eyes so I can see you, but you can't see me. And Dragon checks all of these boxes. They have a long history in action sports, working with the best athletes in the world, and their product is packed with features like their LumiLens technology, which creates the most intensely vivid and crisp colors and optics that I've ever experienced. But what really sold me on these sunglasses is that they float. It's not rocket science. Well, maybe it is rocket science, but whatever. You aren't going to lose your glasses in the lake, in the river, anywhere again, because they're going to float to the top of the water. They don't sink like every other pair of glasses I've ever owned, and that is a game-changing feature for me. And I want you to have this feature as well. So I'm going to save you 15% on all things Dragon. You just need to head over to dragonalliance.com, go shopping, and then enter the code POWEL15 at checkout. That's all one word with 15 being numbers, and you're going to be stoked on these awesome glasses. I want to thank Dragon for coming on and supporting the show. My next sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery, and 10 Barrel does so much for action sports. It's crazy. They sponsor a team of skiers, skaters, and bikers. They sponsor the most important podcasts in the genre. They have their own events. They put out movies. They do everything. But the most important and the greatest thing that they do is their beer, because they have incredible beer. And the newest flavor is by far my favorite. It's a German-inspired Pilsner that is perfect for just about anything. It's light, it's crisp, and I love it so much. So next time you're at the store, please pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and taste the difference. They also have pubs in Denver, San Diego, Idaho, Portland, and their hometown of Bend. To find out more about 10 Barrel and the pubs, head on over to 10barrel.com. My final sponsor this break is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. And while everyone can go check out all the deals over at peterglenn.com, Peter Glenn is so much more than just a website. For over 60 years, Peter Glenn has been getting people out there. Whether you're at one of their East Coast stores or online, you aren't just another transaction to Peter Glenn. You're part of the family. I've worked with a lot of retailers over the years, and that's what separates Peter Glenn from the rest. They care about earning your business, they have a true no-hassle return policy, and they have all the products, all the brands, and the best deals. So please check out Peter Glenn when you're buying all of your outdoor gear. That's round one of sponsors for me. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So do you move to Alpine Meadows with the idea of, hey, I'm going to try to get a job at a shop there. I'm going to ride every day. I'm going to progress and I'm going to become a sponsored rider. I mean, is that in the plans or are you just going up there to ride every day?
That was definitely in the plans. Whether it was going to work or not, who knew? I didn't know if I had the skills or anything, but as far as in the plan, yeah, that was the dream. And I was going to try to do everything I could to do it. It was pretty far-fetched, I'm not going to lie, at the time. Yeah, I didn't know exactly where I fit in that, you know what I mean? Because just being from the city, there was so few people that did ski or snowboard, especially at a high level. You really didn't know how good you were compared to other people necessarily.
Yeah, totally. And were your parents cool with you packing up and moving to the mountains, or did they want you to go to college, or how did that work?
That was an interesting piece. I guess that kind of goes back to where I said I was started formulating the plan, because I think I was formulating it in my mind a lot longer before they knew anything about it. I think it got kind of sprung on them for sure. They weren't too excited about it, to say the least. You know, leaving home at a young age and kind of, not going to college. And I think probably part of what I told them was that I was going to keep going to school up there, as probably a billion people do, right, when they move to a ski town.
Yep.
So that was part of the sales pitch. But yeah, they were definitely a little apprehensive, or, my mom wasn't too excited about me moving away, but it was kind of like, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do. And there's no stopping me, really. So they went along with it. And, and that was that, I guess.
And you end up hooking up with a pack of skiers, I feel like, in the beginning that eventually become your crew. And I think there's two crews, really. There's like the Alpine crew and the Squaw Valley crew. You're part of the Alpine crew. And who are the people that you're riding with? Where you're snowboarding, I think they're skiing.
There was a bunch of guys that were on the cutting edge of the whole ski movement at the time. And it was really cool. They had kind of this punk rock vibe. They were just like outlaws of the mountain, ripping around, like straight lining everything and just charging high speed. And yeah, Clint Fiala was one of them. Rod Adams. Kent Kreitler was over on the squaw side of things more, but he was, definitely heavy influence on these guys and kind of one of the leaders of the pack at that time. There was a whole bunch of other guys behind the scenes that were part of this crew that I swear just were some of the most funny, entertaining humans to date that I've ever known. And, they just had this rat pack of guys that were really fun to hang out with and really fun to ski with. And that was kind of our crew. We moved up into the Alpine Meadows condominiums that are up at the top of the mountain there. So you're literally slope side right off the mountain. And we would ski anytime we weren't working.
And you were on your snowboard at this point. So you're going out with these guys. You're on a snowboard. Most of these guys are on skis. And I think one of the crew is Constantine Papanicolo, I believe is how you say his name. Because I always murder his name. And he emailed me. He's like, hey, my name's actually easy to say. And this is how you say it. But he is an aspiring filmmaker. And he's filming with these guys. I think at that point he's filming for Butter. And does he just suggest you like, hey, dude, you're really good on your snowboard. You should try skiing out?
Not exactly, but close. He came in just a touch later. Actually, I got to give credit to my roommate at the time.
Who's that?
He was a guy named Troy, and he was this diehard skier, and he was really on the cutting edge of fat skis at the time. And so I moved up in 97. So this is winter 97, 98. And when I was snowboarding, and he had gotten his hands on a few pairs of these Rossi cut fat skis, and he made this trip up to Jackson Hole. And I remember him coming back and just raving about these fat skis that he had just mounted up and used on that trip, and was just telling me how they floated and totally different experience. And, being my roommate, we'd kind of discussed my skiing past and kind of like, oh yeah, I've skied quite a bit and I know how to ski. And again, back to the multi-sport thing, I never really quit skiing. I would always ski a few times a year just to make sure I could still do it,
Yeah, totally.
And I would do it. Oh yeah, here we go, and I'd feel it out. And I always wanted to kind of keep those skills. So anyway, we were always talking about this stuff, and we'd kind of compiled all this gear for when we moved to Tahoe. And, I still was a skier in my mind at that point. And I'd gotten a couple pairs of fat skis from this shop in San Rafael where I worked. And so I'd literally had them sitting in my closet, and he knew that. So he came back from this trip and said, dude, you've got to mount these skis up. They're insane. You got to try them out. Do it. And so I did that spring, I believe, and I mounted them up. I had two pairs. I had a pair of Solomon X Mountains, and then I had a pair of Vocal Explosive 2s. And I think I mounted the X Mountains first. And back to some of the other conversations with Clint and Rod and all the boys, I would see them kind of trying some tricks, this and that, mute grabs and some switch 180s and things. And I would kind of tell them, hey, man, I know how to ski pretty decent, and I could do some of those tricks too. And so anyway, all my talking caught up to me, right? So I had to do it. It was time to mount them up and ski. So I did that. And the one memory that sticks out the most is just making some turns down Beaver Bowl at Alpine Meadows on the X Mountains. And yeah, just kind of clicking in my brain that floating and just enjoying the turns and feeling the power again and being like, wow, I see what he's talking about here. Like these things are pretty dang cool and pretty fun. So anyway, it was pretty late in the year. I think I'd already been snowboarding most of the year. And then it was something like March, April when I mounted up these skis. And man, I was kind of instantly addicted again back to skiing at that point.
You're instantly addicted, and I'm sure this doesn't happen the first day, but it sounds like from people I talk to, once you start hitting jumps on your skis, like they know you from snowboarding and you're getting off axis on your snowboard and doing different tricks on your snowboard than anybody's ever even thinking about doing on skis. So the first day that you're really hitting jumps and getting comfortable in the air, you're trying some of the rotations that you were doing on your snowboard. And from people I talked to, they said it was like almost instantaneous, like, holy shit, he's better than us on jumps on like day one because he's got these rotations that we can't even comprehend yet. Did it feel like that to you?
It was kind of weird. Yeah, like I said, I never really quit skiing. So it wasn't like I had to relearn how. Like I said, I'd been telling those guys I know how to do that stuff. And then I did. And I remember I remember doing some big mute grab straight airs off a big 15-foot cornice or whatever. I think it was within the first, week of being on the skis.
Like the Scodio.
I forget the day I learned that I did the first rodeo that I've ever done. I remember it was on this jump over towards the bottom of Alpine Bowl chair. And it was this little roller wind lip that forms over there. So coming back to the first day we met Constantine, he was filming, I believe Clint was over there. And they were filming this little jump. And yeah, I had this vision in my head of trying this flat spin thing. And I had no idea how it was going to work, really. And I just went for it off this little wind lip. And sure enough, I landed right on my feet. And I was kind of like, whoa, that worked somehow. And then I remember doing a bunch in a row after that, whether it was off a cornice or off a bump or off a whatever. I remember just doing a bunch and I don't know, somehow landing most of them. And I believe that was the first time I met Constantine. And he was there filming this thing and I wasn't being filmed. I was just kind of there, just kind of joining the session late and, don't worry about filming me. I'm just going to kind of ride with these guys.
And then after you landed, he's like, can you do that again?
I don't think there's any shots from that day that I know of. I don't know if he ever filmed me or anything. It kind of just sparked, I think, in his mind more for the future, like, oh, I should get that guy involved. It kind of set things up for the invite to come later after that, I guess.
For the next season to film for Chapter 3?
Yeah, so eventually it rolled into filming for Chapter 3 the next season, yeah. That's kind of what the ultimate result was. It kind of took a few twists and turns to get there. And I think ultimately kind of proving myself through that spring a little bit and skiing more and more. And like you were saying, those guys, we built a handful of jumps inbounds, which was cool. We were able to do that back then. But yeah, we built a couple hip jumps and other jumps around the mountain. And there's this other dam that's underneath the buttress there at Alpine Meadows that makes a really cool quarter pipe or like a big spine style jump, I guess.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it was like this spring of progression, everyone's trying to figure out how to do a handful of tricks or basically any type of tricks on their skis and all this progression going on and trying different things. And I guess it ultimately led to kind of proving myself enough to get the invite for the movie for the next year.
And your part for the movie in the next year in Chapter 3, it's something that probably didn't get the credit that it deserved back then. I don't know, maybe it could have, but I didn't hear about it that much back then. But it was something where you were doing all these snowboard tricks and then matching the same tricks with your skis. And before Sean Pettit was even born almost, you were skiing and snowboarding at such a high level. And was the thought process like, both of these sports are cool and I can do everything?
I mean, I really love both of them. I had a vision for sure that I wanted to try to make a career in both. Was it going to work? Yeah, it was pretty far fetched, but I don't know. I thought maybe I could try. I didn't know how, but I thought it could work. Proved not to, but that's okay. But no, I mean, I love to see how many skiers these days are like embracing snowboarding and getting out there and riding some POW on a board. Like, I don't know, they go so hand in hand, like I think to some extent it's like You think about some of the surfers in Hawaii that are, watermen. It's like you can do like all the different types of sports. I kind of feel like in the mountains, I think that's kind of like an ideal type of person to be in the mountains, where you've got experience in all these different categories of mountain sports and that you can be like proficient or good at them. I think that's a really cool way to look at mountain sports and, moving through the snow, and just that there's a bunch of different ways to do it, and being good at multiple ways, I think is really a kind of a cool skill to have.
Yeah, and if you could be pro on both levels, it would be insane. And by filming with Constantine, I would think what that really gives you, other than some respect from a lot of people who see it and starting to build a name for yourself, is something to go to the SIA trade show with and show people, hey, this is me, this is my bio, here's my tape, because I figure you probably travel around with a VHS tape or something back then, and you can go talk to the brands you want. You end up hooking up with Line there. Do you go to any other brands, or are you just looking at Line as one of the brands that's going to change the future of skiing and you want to be with them?
I definitely had a connection with them, and like the reason that I had a vision or whatever connection with Line is because I had met up with Chris Osnes in the same winter. Trying to think. I think it was like in the spring. I think it was the same year we were filming for Chapter 3. And I got to give him a big shout out for helping me out with some stuff, because he helped me out with a couple early sponsors in the clothing department and goggle department and stuff. And he was developing his pro model with Jason Leventhal for Line, the Osnes Dragon.
Yep.
And so anyway, he had kind of told me, hey, I'm making this ski. It's going to be this cool twin tip. And I don't know, I'd be interested in having you check it out, or maybe talk to Jay or get sponsored, essentially. So he kind of set me up. He had kind of planted the seed for Line in me, and I think with Jason. So we'd kind of like heard of each other or whatever. We know we had mutually talked about Line through Chris Osnes. And at that time, you would go to the SIA trade show with your little binder of your resume and a few photos. And it was kind of the thing to do if you were a skier trying to make it at the time. There's only a handful of companies. If I wanted to be a twin tip skier, there was a couple choices, basically. There was Solomon, there was Rosignol, and I think that was kind of it. I guess Dina Star was kind of getting in the game. K2 didn't quite have like a real twin tip at the time.
They were the first. They just didn't have one that worked.
Yeah, they had the Poacher, but it just didn't really count, unfortunately.
Right, yeah.
Cool idea. I'll tell you what, Shane Zox had a sequence in a magazine, though, doing a Misty 720, probably from like 96 or 7 that I saw when I worked at the ski shop in Santa Fe. And that was when I was snowboarding. And I looked at that and I thought, man, that's pretty cool. Things are happening over on that side. And that planted the seed too, seeing people start to do tricks and starting the evolution there.
So I don't know where we got, but we ended up going to Line at the trade show and you getting hooked up with Jay. And when you get sponsored by a brand like Line, Jason's known for being very frugal. Like his trade show booths, he'll buy stuff from Home Depot and return them. Did you make any real money from Line, or is it more just product and travel?
Not the first year. When I went to the trade show and like actually came back with a sponsor and a pair of skis in my hand that were actually twin tip, that was pretty awesome at that point. But later down the road, no, I think I did okay with Line. Yeah, they treated me well. Once I got the pro model rolling, like in 2000 through 2005, they took care of me pretty well. I had a couple other offers from bigger companies during that time that was kind of comparable money. And so I decided to stick with the company that I'd been with since day one, but also kind of matched my vision of the sport, and I think one of the most valuable things they did was the marketing side of things. Looking back on it, how much money that stuff was worth by getting your image out there and actually producing an ad that was actually cool and that actually had like a sequence or, showed some type of progressive skiing at that time. And that was so valuable because so many of the companies, they wanted to buy into the new school or twin tip skiing, whatever you want to call it, free skiing, but they'd buy in and then do something kind of whack. You know what I mean? They'd come out with some ad that was kind of kooky or just kind of whatever, or didn't have any skiing on it. And so that's where Line really matched my vision of kind of what the sport was going to be and the marketing side of things and putting out cool product essentially.
And do they get you involved with Poor Boys? Is that how that happens?
No, actually, they didn't.
Who does that?
Gosh, we got lucky. Somehow after the year of chapter 3, I believe, Evan Raps and myself were real good buddies, skiing all the time together. And, we'd skied a ton together in chapter 3 for that movie. Somehow, some way, we were in Squaw one day, and I just remember being with Evan, and we got like a call from Johnny D. And he was like, this doesn't happen very often, but like the boys want you guys in the movie, essentially. Meaning like, I believe, like Vinny and Crisson and the boys up there in Whistler.
That's crazy.
Somehow we got the invite to be in that first movie for me, which was The Game that came out in 2000. Yeah, it was kind of a weird backwards process where I got the invite to be in Poor Boys. And so then we went to Line to try to get them to kind of sponsor the movie for the business side of things.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and Stanley is a brand that I trust. I like the people who work there, and I've always been a big fan of their products. They've been around since 1913, and they invented the keep things hot and cold categories. It's that green bottle that your grandpa took everywhere that he possibly went. That's Stanley. And unlike these new copycat brands, Stanley has stayed true to itself, not jacking up their prices like everyone else that markets themselves as an outdoor adventure brand. Stanley is the original. And because they love my show and you, my listeners, they're offering the best deal you're going to find anywhere from Stanley right here. You're going to get 30% off all things Stanley. I highly recommend picking up a set of the pint glasses as I use them on a daily basis. To get the deal, what you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping. At checkout, you're going to enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, and you'll get the deal. If you spend over $100, I'll send you a Powell Movement beanie on top of that. In keeping with the theme of original, my next sponsor, Rollerblade, pretty much invented inline skating. And based on all of us being stuck inside for way too long over this pandemic, getting outside and getting in shape and having fun should be the priority. And that's what Rollerblade is best at. They make the most comfortable, high-performance skates on the market that you can use for training, transportation, or preparing for ski season. And ski season is so close that now's the time to download Rollerblade's award-winning Skate to Ski app. It will put you on the path to having your best ski season ever. You can download the Skate to Ski app on the App Store and find out everything else about Rollerblade over at rollerblade.com. My final sponsor is Alpine Vans. And in this day and age of having a mobile adventure unit, from start to finish, no one makes the van building process easier, more fun, and most importantly, better than the rest. Well, I could go on about the beauty of their builds. You can check out the 15-minute look at Cody Townsend's van that he created for the 50 project with Alpine Vans and get an idea of what paying attention to every single detail means. Cody's rig is a functional thing of beauty that looks as good as it performs. And Alpine Vans is your one-stop shop to make the van of your dreams a reality. They have the designers and fabricators who all have degrees, but have also lived the life. Think ski patrollers who open and close resorts and live in the lots. Mountain bikers who will spend weeks upon end in their vehicle, using that as their mobile adventure unit. These guys have lived it, they understand it, and that experience is what makes them the best. And right now, while other people are scrambling to find vehicles because of the technology shortage, Alpine has 8 Mercedes Sprinters ready to go. You can have your Dreammobile in your driveway in 90 days. So head on over to alpinevans.com to start your build today. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. You film with MSP, I believe, as well, right?
Yep. When it rains, it pours, right? So the same year filmed a bunch with MSG and Poor Boys kind of back and forth. And, those days, a lot of times they would come to events and just film stuff at the event. And then you'd maybe do a side trip or go hit a rail that night. Or it was a much more loose program for filming. And then I think I went on 1 or 2 trips with each of them kind of during that year at some point.
Do you ever get to go on a McConkey trip?
Not a McConkey trip, I guess, but I'd skied a lot with McConkey at Squaw.
What's your funniest Shane story?
Man, I don't know. We were talking about, I was telling someone the other day how it was really cool between McConkey and Gaffney. They were so interested in the new school skiing and what was going on with it that they would really come to us and they would come spend time in the park and hang out. Just the energy and the stoke was so real. That was when Shane was doing like switch back flips and switch back fulls and switch back 180s and all that stuff. And, we were just kind of vibing off each other. And he was just so stoked to kind of be part of the movement, I guess, at that time. We were a little bit younger, but they were just really stoked to be around it and kind of like also learning from it and kind of picking up stuff. And just everything was so new and exciting. But you asked for a funny Shane story. Gosh. Whenever you put me on the spot, I'm really bad at coming up with a story, I gotta say.
But you come up with other stuff in between that's perfect, so it doesn't matter. We're going to go into 2000, though. So you're filming for these movies in 2000, so that's two things that you're doing. But 2000 is the biggest year of your life for like many good reasons, and then one bad one that'll haunt you for the rest of your life a little bit. It starts off, I think, you have the Red Bull Huck Fest event. Was that one of the first big Red Bull events in the U.S.?
I think so. Well, it depends which one you're talking about, I guess.
The one you took second.
That was actually the second Huck Fest ever. The one they did the year before, they did on the Wave, the big natural jump that's at Snowbird.
Yep.
And that was their first Red Bull event, I think, ever. Or one of their first free skiing events ever. And that was actually, I could safely say, my first, not that I was actually pro at the time, but that was my first big event I ever competed in. It was a trip because, I don't know, I was meeting all these other skiers that in my mind were way better than me and were much more professional skiers than me. But then, fast forward a year later, lots of things have changed. And I got second, I believe, to Candide or Phil Bellinger. I can't remember which one.
I think it was Phil on that one and Candide at the X Games.
Uh-huh. That sounds right. I just remember, there's always this cool shot of Candide doing a D-spin and he does the infamous flare to lip to 360 in on the sketchy 8-foot quarter pipe that was feature 2 on the big air course there.
Another huge moment of that year, because this is all in year 2000, is the X Games. You're in that big air event. You land your Switch Rodeo 7. No one had ever landed that in a comp before, which is funny to think of now because you are at these comps where the tricks are just absolutely insane. And you landing a Switch Rodeo 7 was unheard of at that time. Does that kind of make you chuckle now when you look at the tricks you see on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's come a long way. Yeah, the moves everyone's doing are insane. What makes me happy is I love to see so many people still really enjoying doing Switch Rodeo 7s. It's one of those tricks that just never gets old. It's just a great trick, and it's cool to see people doing it. So I guess it's not irrelevant. It's just not as many degrees of spinning as these days. But in my mind, that's okay. But in the big scheme of things, it is crazy to think how much it has progressed.
Yeah, the last big moment for you in 2000, there's the quarter pipe contest in Tokyo, and you end up getting third there. And we don't need to talk about it much, but are you treated like a rock star when you go to Japan? Because you hear about everything being bigger in Japan for American athletes. Did you feel that when you were there?
We did. Because for one thing, Line was big in Japan. They got a distribution deal over there early on. And so they had a lot more distribution in Japan than they did in Europe at the time. And so a ton of the Japanese skiers knew Line and they knew our team. And so we really did get treated like rock stars. It was pretty awesome. Yeah, we did a few trips over there and every time it was, they were so nice. Hospitality is insane. Just so fired up, so stoked on skiing. And that was the core X Games was in 2000. And actually, that was one of my other biggest results ever. I won the big air there and also got third in the quarter pipe.
So that's a huge one for you.
That was huge. Yes.
And then the other big things, which are probably bigger than these contests, is 2000 is also the year you get your first cover with Powder. This is significant for so many different reasons. First, how big of a deal is it for you to get a cover, period? Is that one of your dreams, just being a skate and snow guy your whole life?
I mean, all this stuff happened really quick. It was kind of surreal. It was your dream coming true, It's like, wow, I didn't know if any of that stuff would ever happen. So for that to start happening was crazy. And to see it, and it just was a whirlwind, I guess. Nothing was planned out or thought out. Yeah, and a lot of it was kind of just some luck involved, right place, right time. I was lucky enough to go on a powder trip up to Alyeska with Dave Reddick, who, is the editor at Powder Magazine. And he happened to get this really cool image of a tail grab, and it happened to end up on the cover. And it was like totally surreal for me, totally surreal. And actually, I had at the same time, it was the same month at the cover of Freeze. There was a picture from Chris O'Connell from Parkosaurus down in Snow Summit. So my mind was blown. For me, the year couldn't get any better. All the contest results, film trips, success. And then all of a sudden I'm looking on the newsstand in October, and there I am on the cover of Powder and Freeze. So at that point I was on cloud nine.
Those covers are so important to the industry because the Powder one, you're on a Fat Twin, which had never been on the cover of Powder magazine, and the industry probably laughed at that shit at that point. Then the Freeze cover, you're on a handrail. It's one of those lit up night shots. I don't think that had been put on a cover before. Another thing that the ski industry probably laughs about, where in snowboarding, they've always embraced handrails. They've never been like, oh, it ruins your base and your edges. But in the ski world, the old school mentality of people, that's kind of what the old guys were thinking back then. So it's like you're ushering in a new era in two different respects, which is pretty amazing. Did you even think about it like that, or were you just psyched to get all that coverage?
Not at the time, for sure. Everything was just new and happening fast. And, I was basically just trying to take any opportunity that was available and run with it. And I don't know why they chose that shot for the cover, whatever. O'Connell must have got the exposure right or something, but lucky me,
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it was a cool session at Snow Summit. I remember Clint had built the jump onto the rail, but then I remember we were sessioning with Phil LaRose and Phil Bellinger too, because in the shot in the game, there's actually 3 rails in a row. So we were doing it more for the video shot. And then, the cover shot came out as a extra piece, but I didn't think of it like that. I was just in a whirlwind trying to have as much fun and I guess just kind of do as many new things and kind of fulfill some of the visions I had in my head of where I wanted the sport to go. And those things just kind of came from it. But back to the skis that were on the cover of Powder, those were these prototype motherships. And I actually do remember getting laughed at in the ski shop in Alyeska where I went to mount those up. And they looked at me and were like, what the hell are these? Because they were fat and they were soft and they had twin tips. And the guy was just like, whatever. All right, cool. They didn't know what to think. They were like, whoa, these are crazy. Okay.
Now they have a pair in their closet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your career is crazy, though, because the trajectory it goes on, in 97, you're a snowboarder. In 98, you start filming and you get a part. You're fully sponsored by 99. This year, 2000, I'm talking about, you're on top of the world. I mean, even your home life is like, you live with Evan Rapps, Shane Anderson, Tanner Hall, C.R. Johnson. So you're living with the who's who of skiing. You're doing everything you could possibly do. Are you making 6 figures being a pro skier at that point in your career? Even though it's only year 2 in it, but I mean, you're on top of everything. Did the contracts build really quick when people realized what was happening?
I did pretty well, yeah. I wasn't making 6 figures, but I was doing all right, It was getting up close to that.
And that's just a trajectory. It was going to hit 6 figures at some point. But first, ESPN needs to come out to you to film a profile on you, to tell your story for the next X Games, because you have a really compelling story. This dude was a snowboarder 3 years ago. He's now going to win our X Games gold medal in ski, or very potentially could. Do they just come to you and they're like, what cool shit do you have at your house? And you're like, oh, I've got this motocross bike and you can get some footage of me just ripping around my yard. Is that kind of how the whole thing is set up?
Not exactly, but kind of. So I'd actually been riding motocross every day, all day, that whole summer. JT Holmes, good buddy. And back then we were motoing every day. All summer long, we were ripping, having a great time. I got a call about the interview piece to do. And then on top of that, they were going to have Dave Cioni film it, who's a filmer still for ESPN, but he's a super OG snowboarder.
He's a legend.
He's a legend. Exactly. And so I'm like, damn, this is crazy. I got to do something cool. It was towards the end of the summer. And so I think the weather had been kind of bad for a few weeks. Anyway, I wanted to make it cool. What can I do that's cool? They didn't really care. They were like, we can do whatever. If you want to do something, we can just do this interview. And so it's kind of up to me. In hindsight, it was obviously the dumbest thing I could ever do at that point to be going out and jumping my dirt bike in October or whatever it was, before this probably biggest season of my life. But, when you're 21 or 22, you don't think like that. So anyway, essentially, I wanted to make the interview cool. To me at that time, and a lot of action sports people were kind of in, there was a multi-sport thing going on. And I looked up to a few guys. Like I really looked up to Noah Selaznick, rest in peace.
Yeah.
He was an awesome motocrosser. And I remember seeing him ripping jumps in the early years I was in Tahoe. And to me, it just was like a really cool thing to do and fun also. So bottom line was, it was my choice. And we went out to the track out in Prosser and Truckee where I had been riding a ton all summer. It had been raining a bunch. And that was the first red flag, was there was this puddle right in front of this tabletop jump, and probably should have just set up the bike on the stand and done an interview right next to it and not tried to do anything.
But you're young, man. That shit's going to happen.
That's not the mentality, when you're charging. So anyway, we set up, hit the jump a handful of times. It was weird conditions. And then, hit the jump, slipped out, kind of like lost a little speed and then cased it. But because it was muddy, it kind of slipped out when I landed.
Okay.
It really wasn't a very bad crash at all. I kind of just tumbled off the bike. But because it was really muddy, I planted my foot. And as I tumbled, I rolled around it. And it didn't even really hurt. I just felt a lot of stuff go wrong in there. And I literally sat up and was like, I just broke my leg.
Oh.
Like, let's go. Take me to the hospital. Like, it took a few minutes for it even pain to kick in, but it was just like, oh, crap.
And it was like a catastrophic break.
Well, so at first they thought it was just the tibial plateau, which is not a great bone to break, but nothing close to as serious as what ended up happening. So I went into the hospital in Truckee. They took an x-ray and checked it out. But my biggest mistake was that I didn't pursue getting an MRI because I didn't have any idea that there was something else wrong inside there.
Yeah.
So they told me, tibia plateau, you might need surgery, you might not. We'll figure that out in the next couple of days. It didn't seem that catastrophic at the time. It was like, okay, I really blew it. I'm not going to be able to ski this year, but I'm going to be fine. In 6 to 8, 10 weeks, whatever, I should be healing up and be fine. I got sent home. And really in the next 48 hours is like when everything kind of changed. I was in excruciating pain, and we kept calling and checking in and asking, what, it's not supposed to hurt this much. They tell you, it's a really painful injury. But this was something different. It was just a weird thing. And so after basically 48 hours, went back in and was like, no, something is majorly wrong. This is too painful. It's not right. And I took my sock off, and the doctor looks at my foot and he's like, holy crap. And my foot was like kind of purple, starting to, but like it was a weird color. And he instantly was like, this is not good. Like, whoa. And luckily they were able to kind of kick into gear and get some things rolling. And I got into this emergency surgery with the chairman of vascular surgery, happened to be in that day. And a hellish 24 hours later, or whatever, I was very lucky to still have a leg on there.
There was a chance you could have lost it, right? Like it was almost like 50-50?
It was really bad, yeah. Because essentially it had been internally bleeding for about 48 hours.
Oh.
Very slightly, I guess. But that was hitting the point where it was starting to lose circulation. And there was a blood clot in there. No, it was really about as bad as it could get without it coming off.
Yeah.
You start getting all the speeches from the doctors. They're telling you that keeping it on is going to be more work than cutting it off. And it's like, no. Whether you're in a half jug state or not at that point, I was still coherent enough to be like, there's no way in hell that's happening. But obviously I didn't have control of that. But that was my mentality. It was like, I'm going to do everything I can or whatever. I'm going to try everything. And gosh, that was, yeah, really scary time in there.
How long does it take you to get back on snow again? Because while a lot of people would have counted you out and thought your career was over, it's not over by any means. I mean, you still end up online for a few more years, then you transfer over, I think, to vocal, you film with TGR, you still do a lot of shit with your career, a pro skier to like 2010, but how long does it take you to go from injury to being able to ski? I mean, you'll never be yourself again like you were when you were 21 before the injury, but how long to get to where you're happy with what you're able to put out?
You know, it was a road. I got on snow fairly quickly, but then to where I was feeling good was definitely a few more months. I was really lucky because the success that I'd had the year before, it allowed me essentially to be treated like an actual professional skier, which was definitely a blessing, where I was able to focus on rehab 5 days a week, and that's all I did. And so I was very, very lucky that I didn't have to kind of throw in the towel and go back to a regular job or whatever, kind of like give up everything I'd figured out up until that point. And so I was able to like focus on trying to get healthy and get skiing again, like 100%. And that's all I did. I would go to, rehab and PT 5 days a week and the gym 5 days a week. And I put in a lot of work. And that, I think a lot of that in a weird way, I certainly learned a lot, like about myself and about my body and about kind of the mental side of things too, but essentially I focused on it 100% all day, every day. That's all I did was try to get better. And gosh, I think I skied like 6 months later.
Okay. So it was just a scary time. I mean, given you'll never be the same, like I said, but it was a really scary time where you thought you were going to lose the leg. But then once you got through that and through the rehab, you could see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I could. Yeah. It still is such a weird injury. There's a lot of swelling and weird other pieces. So I kind of had to always really stay on top of maintenance. That was one of the things that kind of never changed. I guess I would ski hard, but then you kind of pay the price, it would be swollen or painful, or I'd have certain days where things would hurt more or hurt less. And I guess battle through it. And I continued doing PT on my kind of whole lower leg for years, basically the whole time I skied. Kind of like what I needed to do to allow me to ski, but also try to kind of get back to where I wanted to be with my skiing. It was just an ongoing process from that point on.
So where the pro career was super easy for you to make happen in 97, it was like you actually had to work really, really hard for it from 2001 on. So it's kind of like night and day from how it was. But you still keep it going, and it goes to like 2010. Eventually, you go do a valet service where you're running a car service in Tahoe. And then you get picked up by the US ski team, and you're a coach on the US team. Normally, I would talk about a bunch of that stuff, but we've been going for a while, and I have some amazing inappropriate questions that I need to get to you from a blast from the past for you. One of your old roommates, he's been on the podcast before, and he's a legend in the ski world, although he's not brought up as much as he should be these days. He's also a legend in the salmon world because he's saving the salmon as we speak. I'm talking about Shane Anderson. And are you ready for question number 1 from Shane?
I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
Hey, Sko, what's up, man? It's been a long time. Miss you. Got a couple questions for you. One point in time, Vans made a poster with us, shared poster with you and me on it, and we did a lot of poster signings over the years and ski movie tours and different events. Did you ever have any ski groupies? And if so, maybe you could elaborate on those experiences.
I feel like poster signings are a lost art these days. It's cool to see that they do it still at movie premieres and stuff. I don't think it's as glamorous as maybe some people thought it was as far as groupies and stuff like that. It was awesome to have fans, that's for sure. Like I really enjoyed poster signings. People were stoked. God, it was actually really hard to come up with what you were going to write on all these different posters.
But there was never a girl that came to the poster signing with like, hey, I'm going to take Skogen home, and then you obliged?
I don't know. There was the East Coast movie tour that they did with Freeze, with MSP and Poor Boys in 2000.
Yep.
was pretty ridiculous. I mean, we had Seth Morrison and Josh Lubeck, and everybody is on this. I think McConkey's even on the bus with us. We're literally on a tour bus. You know, it was a K2 tour bus, I believe, that was owned by Willie Nelson previously.
Yep.
Got turned into the Freeze tour bus. There was a lot of wild times on there that may or may not have happened. I think at some point or time, everyone on the tour probably got their lucky number pulled, right?
Not the jerk.
There were some good times had, you know, a lot of wholesome fun that went down back then, but no specific times. Yeah, may or may not have happened a couple times.
All right. Well, I was on that tour at the State College stop and I think a Philadelphia stop as well. And there was a lot of debauchery, it seemed like. We will go into question number 2 from Shane Anderson.
There was a tradition amongst our group of friends and essentially our whole household when we lived together in Truckee. After someone would win a contest, maybe you could elaborate on that tradition and some of the apparatuses used and the origin of that tradition.
Sounds like you might not want to talk about it.
Yeah, there was a tradition to have a good time after the contest. Definitely the fact that we were in a position that we were even on the podium or winning contests at all, and that multiple people in our friend group were able to pull that off, and that we were able to celebrate together and have a good time afterwards. That was kind of a beautiful thing in itself, of in the golden era of skiing there.
All right, well, we will leave that one at that. I think that was a good answer, and we'll go with your final inappropriate question from Shane.
Well, it's not really that inappropriate, but just out of curiosity, when did you know that it was time to hang up the skis and move on? We all have our different moments of transition, and it's a hard one, and just curious when that was and why it was and how you're doing with it all.
It was kind of right around that 2009, 2010 time frame. The ski industry, kind of similar to a few years recently here, just wasn't doing that good. And the economy wasn't doing that good. And people's paychecks were getting cut. You know, for me, I came to a point where I'd been doing this business side of skiing for, you know, almost 10 years at that point. I was weighing the business side and kind of what you had to do to keep it going, you know. And at that point, you know, I wasn't getting paid a ton. You know, I was doing okay, but money was going down that you're getting paid. Yet you're putting your life on the line and doing all this stuff. And it's like, I think I got to a point where I was a little bit over the business side of things in skiing. And due to the paychecks getting cut, I decided skiing is my passion. And I wanted to keep skiing as pure as I could and ski for fun, essentially, is what I decided. And that I was going to make money another way, so that I could continue to ski and love it, you know, and not turn it into something that I didn't love anymore, I guess. And I'll tell you what, it was what I needed to do. I had a couple years of probably some of the funnest, like, soul shredding of my life, where I didn't have to go film a shot. Because as many people do, you get so obsessed with all the shots and things that I want to get. That's all I can think about. That's all I want to go do. And so it just kind of takes over everything. When I decided to step away and kind of ski for myself, man, it was really enjoyable. And I found like I almost was even more driven to like huck off cliffs and it was just that like ski bum kind of full circle feeling where I was almost back to full ski bum and just really doing it for the love. Resort days, you know, skiing bell to bell, storm days, ripping around squaw with friends, hucking cliffs. And just like really doing that for the right reasons, you know, and just for the love of skiing. That was my motivation, I guess. Yeah, it was just time, right? When the money runs out, then it's time.
Yeah.
But I feel like I could have kept going on the business side. I could have kept, you know, making it happen.
Could have milked it for a couple more years.
Totally. Could have. But I still love skiing, probably more than really anything. And those days when I get out on a storm day and I'm just like ripping around and just motoing on traverses and airing little moguls and popping little powder pillows and stuff, like I don't ever want to stop doing that. So whatever happens, hopefully that never goes away.
Well, that's awesome. And that's the podcast. And in looking at it, it's like the one thing with your career is like it was almost taken from you. You're on top of the world, and injury could have sent you into a downward spiral where you just feel sorry for yourself and you don't work hard to get yourself back. But it seems like you're pretty even keeled, like there's no highs and lows in your world from what I've seen. And you were able to just put your head to the grindstone and make shit happen for yourself and get back. And it's pretty cool to see that you had 10 more years of a career that really could have been over after that injury. So it's been awesome to watch you progress the sport from the beginning, and also just cool to see your work ethic and being able to make it happen for a long career. And you're still in it, man. You're still coaching the best in the world, and that's awesome to see too. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, no, I can't be more thankful and appreciative for, all the people that have kind of helped along the way. And I feel very lucky to have been presented these opportunities, and super lucky. And gosh, follow what you love, and hopefully good things happen for you.
So that was time with Skogen Sprang, and what a scary story his was. While it was awesome at times, it definitely had its scary moments. I mean, it started like a rocket ship, but then one strange injury robbed him of being one of the most influential skiers of all time. I say that knowing that Skogen is one of the most influential skiers, but think, if he didn't almost lose his leg, the future of skiing could have changed a lot faster. But shit happens, and the great thing about Skogen is that he always focused on keeping things looking good and keeping the sport cool. He's now working with a group of elite athletes who may not always have that mindset, so it's nice to know that Skogen's there to keep them in check. That's the podcast this week. Now it's time for the review of the week, and this is my first international read, but I'm not shipping beanies to Canada or any other country for that matter. Sorry, I'm a jerk. If I do read your review of the week on the podcast and you are from outside of the US, I will send a beanie to the person of your choice within the US. So I know I suck, but that's all I'm going to do. I just recently noticed the reviews from other countries, and there are some great ones. This one is from Canada. It's a 5-star review that comes from Warren Bevian. The title is decent. Sure, you have a funny podcast name. You're well prepped, much to my delight, and to the bane of your guests sometimes. I think you're hilarious, yada yada. But the way you disarmed Kristen so quickly when she was clearly having a bad day is the best example yet of why your podcasts are so fun and funner. That was another great podcast. I love hearing real talk with real skiers so much. Keep it up while we wait for the snow to fly. Can't wait for the Seth 69-part miniseries. Well, Warren, I thank you for that review. I don't think Seth is going to 69 me with anything, and that's probably a good thing. I'm not complaining about that, but I don't think he'll do a podcast either, and that's unfortunate. I haven't heard from him in a couple years, but I like to try to disarm my guests right in the beginning of the podcast a lot of different times, especially if I don't know them. And yeah, with Kristen, I think you're referring to me talking about the art cars and how she's out of the box, not a cookie cutter person. And I think she did appreciate that, and she did open up. And I try to do that a lot with a lot of different people. I did it with Rusty Malinowski, and he is a giant wakeboarder who could break me in half. And I commented about his voice a little bit because he's got a higher voice than most dudes that are giants. And he didn't like it that much. He said he might jump across the table and beat me up if we were in person, but I think that was all a joke, and we had a great podcast. So sometimes trying to disarm people works, and sometimes it doesn't. But either way, the podcasts go on, and I thank you very, very much for that review. So now, Warren, you can email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com with who you want me to send a beanie to in the US, and I will take care of that for you. For anybody else who wants a beanie, please review me on iTunes. If I read your review on the podcast, I'll send you a beanie. And like I said before, if you're not in the US, I will send a beanie on your behalf to someone in the US because I don't like paying international shipping or doing all the paperwork. I had to do that for 16 years at K2, and it was always just such a hassle to me. But I love other countries, and I want you to have a beanie. I'm just not shipping them your way. Sorry about that. At this point, the podcast is now over. I want to thank all of you for listening, regardless of what country you live in. And I want to ask you all to support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Dragon, Alpine Vans, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Rollerblade. Have a great week, everyone.